Hello chaps, welcome to John Robson Guitar Tuition once again. As ever, I do hope you're well. Now then, today's little video is all about bar chords, basically. I did a video ages ago on the actual technique of playing them, you know, how to place your fingers on the neck and all that sort of stuff. So if you're struggling with the actual technique of playing bar chords, I'll put a link in the description box below where you can check that out. But one of the things I deal with a lot when I get a new student coming to me who can play already is that quite often their ability to play stuff on the guitar, including bar chords, exceeds their knowledge of what it is they're playing. So the way this often manifests itself is when we're just having the initial get to know each other kind of session, I'll say, okay, let's see where you're at with chords, and I'll say, give me a G chord, and they'll do that. Give me a D chord, and they'll do that. And you know, I'll run through all of the open chords, and at some point I'll say, right, okay, play me an F, and they'll do that. And it's at that point that I always chuck something into the mix. I'll say, okay, give me a D sharp minor. And then the confusion begins, really. The blank look comes on the face and they say, oh, hang on, that's D minor, right, so, and they try and kind of modify a D minor chord to make it into a D sharp minor chord, and you know, basically they haven't a clue. So this video is for you if you have the ability to play bar chords, but if you're confused by C sharp minor, D sharp minor, F sharp minor, all those kind of slightly intimidating sounding chords with lots of syllables in their name, which a lot of people seem to think corresponds to how difficult the chord is going to be. It doesn't. But if that sort of thing is causing you a few headaches, then this one's for you. And I think we need to start off really with a few real basics. Let's begin with something called the chromatic scale, which is essentially the DNA of all music. Right then, the notes that we use in our Western system of music are all named in one way or another after the first 7 letters of the alphabet, as you can see here. And this is how they would look if you mapped them out along the length of a single string on the guitar. As you can see, there are some gaps between some of these notes. So what's going on there? Well, this is where we encounter this symbol called sharp, which basically means 1 fret or 1 step higher. So if we go back to that A note from the open 5th string and we go up 1 fret from that, what's happened is we've made an A note 1 fret higher. It's therefore called A sharp. Next we have the B, then the C moves up 1 fret and becomes a C sharp. Then we get D, after that D sharp, which is a D that's been moved up 1 fret. Then an E, then an F, then move an F up 1 fret and it becomes an F sharp. After that we have G, and then move G up 1 fret and it becomes a G sharp, and finally we come back to A again. Now then, this isn't the only way that we can reference these notes that are in the gaps. There is another way. If we start counting in the opposite direction from this A at the top end of the neck and come down, we encounter this symbol called flat, which basically means 1 fret or 1 step lower. And therefore, if you take that A note and move it down 1 fret, it becomes an A flat. This is the same note that we encountered a moment ago when we called it G sharp. It can have 2 different names depending upon the context in which it's being used. Here, as we're going down, we'll call it A flat. After that, we come back to the G note and move the G note down a fret, we get a G flat. After that we get an F, move the F down a fret, we get an E. Move the E down a fret and we get an E flat. After that we come to a D, which if we move that down a fret becomes D flat. Then moving that down 1 we end up on C. Go down one from C and we come to B, and if you move B down a fret you come to B flat, and finally you arrive back on A. So these notes that are in the gaps between the A, B, C, D, E, F, G and A have two names. You can either call them the sharp version of the note below them or the flat version of the note above them. So for instance, in between A and B we have either an A sharp because it's an A that's been moved up one, or a B flat because it's a B that's been moved down one. It's the same note, it just has two different names. And the basic rule is that every note, if moved up one fret, becomes the same note, sharp, and every note, if moved down one fret, becomes the same note, flat, except B always goes straight to C and vice versa. There's no note in between B and C, no such thing as a B sharp or a C flat. And E always goes straight to F and vice versa. There is no such note as an E sharp or an F flat. And the way that you remember this is that B and C stands for beer and chips. Just remember, B and C are always next to each other, just like beer and chips. When does that happen? Every Friday, E and F. So beer and chips every Friday, B, C, E, F, and if you apply that sharp and flat rule to all of the other notes, then you will have a pretty good chance of figuring out the chromatic scale, as it's called. This is what you get if you move up one fret at a time, or move down one fret at a time for that matter. Now I'll be the first person to admit that this system of naming the 12 notes in a musical scale is a bit cumbersome. If you were starting from scratch today to come up with a system of naming the notes, you wouldn't end up with anything like this, where some notes go straight to the next note and then other notes don't. There's another note in between, and that in between note can have two different names depending upon the context in which it's being used. We're saddled with it, we have to deal with it really. It's evolved this way over centuries, and if you're interested in how that's evolved, then I did a video on this very topic called The Mathematics of Music. There's a link in the description below if you are as much of a theory nerd as I am. Go and check it out. Anyway, this whole chromatic scale thing, what you get going up or down in one fret stages, is a massively important thing to know for not just bar chords, but many, well, all aspects of playing the guitar really. Especially lead guitar, knowing where the notes are on the neck is just, it makes it so much easier. In fact, it doesn't solve problems knowing where the notes are on the neck, it stops the problems being problems in the first place. So let's just take a little detour and have a look at how you can utilize this knowledge for figuring out where notes are on the neck. I often think that it's useful to think of the chromatic scale rather than as a line of notes, but more of a spiral, like a spiral staircase, where you keep coming back to the same point again and again, just a higher or lower version of it. And you can see from this that in order to count the distance between any note and any other note, all you've got to do is count the spokes on the wheel, so to speak. And if, for instance, you want to know what note is at a particular fret on the guitar, on a particular string, then just count up the relevant number of steps from the open string starting point that you're looking at. For instance, if you wanted to know what the note at the 6th fret on the G string is, count round this wheel and you will see that it's a C sharp or a D flat. And pretty soon you begin to get a really good knowledge of where the notes are on the neck, and this is such a useful thing to know for so many applications. Anyway, back to the bar chords. Right then, let's start with this bar chord shape, probably the first one that most people learn, which is the F chord. Now, apologies if I'm teaching Granny to suck eggs here, maybe you already know this, but I'll just mention it in case you don't. What you're actually doing when you're playing this F shape is you're taking an E chord and you're moving it one step up the chromatic scale to F. And what you can then do is you can continue that chromatic progression using the chromatic scale that we've been looking at, and get a different chord at every fret. So if we pick a number between 1 and 12, let's go halfway, 0.6, we know that that's an F, that's going to be an F sharp, that's going to be a G, G sharp, A sharp, or you could call it B flat, whichever you prefer. So yeah, you get a different chord at every particular fret. And there's another bar chord shape that you can do this with to get the same chords, and it's this A chord here. And what we're going to do is we're going to move that up in exactly the same way. Instead of playing it with those three fingers, I'm going to play it with those three, like that. Move it up a fret, put the bar on behind it, and we get that. Personally, I don't play it like that. I do the I think slightly more convenient way of just covering those three strings with one finger, but you pays your money, you takes your choice. So that, what's that chord there then if we play that? Well, it's an A chord that we've moved one step up the chromatic scale, which is an A sharp chord, or B flat, if you want to call it that. Now hang on, we figured out that this was a B flat earlier, and you can hear that is the same chord. And once again, you just follow that chromatic progression as you go up the neck. And here's a diagram that you can pause the video if you want and look at this in all of its gory detail, which chords are at which frets basically. So that's major chords taken care of. What about minor chords? Well, it's exactly the same principle. Instead though of using an E major shape and an A major shape, we use an E minor shape and an A minor shape to move up the neck in exactly the same way. So once again, let's pick a number between 1 and 12, 8. Let's go for 8. Let's take this E minor shape, there it is, and move it up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 frets. What chord is that? Well, we start on E, then F sharp, then G sharp, then A sharp, then B, then C. And because we're using a minor shape, that gives us a C minor chord. Maybe you have to play a C minor chord in a song, but that's quite a long way up the neck to go. A typical chord change where you might have a C minor, you might be in kind of the key of G, where you're playing maybe a G chord to a D chord to a C chord to a C minor, and that's, you know, a long way to move up the neck. So how can we make that a little bit more convenient? Well, instead of using the E minor shape, let's use the A minor shape. There it is there, and if we move that up one fret, it becomes an A sharp minor. Move it up another fret, it becomes a B minor. Move it up another fret, it becomes a C minor. There it is, and there was the C minor up at the 8th fret. There it is there. You can hear it's the same chord, and you can see that it's a lot easier to get to if you're playing the rest of the chords down at this open position part of the neck. Once again, here is a diagram showing where all of these minor chords are as you move up and down the neck with the E minor shape and the A minor shape using the chromatic scale. Okay, a lot of the students I teach tend to make quite a basic error a lot of the time when they're talking about sharps and flats and stuff like that. I've even seen a really good guitarist on YouTube. The guy is renowned for his guitar technician skills, and he's a really good player as well. And what he did was, he'd been demonstrating how to set up this guitar, and He said, and look, now it plays perfectly. There's an A chord, there's a D chord, there's a G chord, there's an E flat. That's not an E flat, that's an E minor. And this is the error I'm talking about. A lot of people seem to conflate major and minor somehow with sharp and flat. And they are not the same. They mean completely different things. Every Christmas, at some point, I get asked to teach, you know, the Slade song. What is it? Here it is. Merry Christmas, everybody. That's it. And the chords for that, for the chorus, are G, B minor, B flat, D. Okay, so you get that recognisable chorus for the song, and it's that B minor to B flat thing that confuses the living daylights out of some people. They'll play either a B minor for both chords, or they'll play a B flat for both chords, or they'll just play both chords the wrong way around. And you know, then they'll come to me and say, I just can't seem to make this song sound right. Well, I wonder why. So for future reference, here is what the terms major and minor mean as opposed to sharp and flat. Major, a group of notes which together produce a happy sound. Minor, a group of notes which together produce a sad sound. And as we've already seen, sharp means move up one fret. There's an F chord. Move it up one fret, it becomes an F sharp chord. The F sharp chord is, like the F chord, a major chord. How do we know it's not minor? Well, because it doesn't have the word minor in its name. There's a B chord. Okay, move that down one fret and it becomes a B flat chord. B flat is not the same as B minor. B flat is a major chord. How do we know B flat is a major chord? Because it doesn't have the word minor in its name. I think you get the idea. Right then, I hope that's shone some light on the whole topic of bar chords. This really is probably the first instance that most guitarists encounter where it begins to be apparent that you need to know where stuff is on the neck. You're kind of moving out of that initial stage of playing the guitar where you're just memorising shapes that you put your fingers into. Now you've got to be able to figure stuff out, and hopefully that's given you some help in your journey with that. If you found this video useful, interesting, enlightening, or maybe even a bit inspiring, then please hit the subscribe button, and that way you'll get to see more of them. If you live on Teesside in the northeast of England, then give me a shout for some tailored one-to-one guitar tuition. The details of how to get in touch are at the end of this video. Even if you don't live on Teesside, give me a shout anyway, because I also do lessons via Skype. I'll also just take this opportunity to give the usual plug for the two albums that I've got out at the moment. One is called Handles for Folks, that's the most recent one, and the one that came out about a year ago now is called The Whiskey Made Me Do It. Both albums are absolutely chock full of bluesy, shreddy, melodic rock guitar playing, so what's not to like there? And you can get them in all the usual online places, and there's a link in the description below to my website where you can find all of the download links. And with that, I'll wish you all a good day, and I'll see you all again next time. Thanks for watching. Bye for now, folks.